It was the beginning of autumn when I landed my job at the 7-Eleven gas station on the outskirts of town. The gas station, an old building painted in faded green and white, had a flickering neon sign that read, "Open 24 hours." I wasn't thrilled about working the night shift, but the paycheck was enticing, and I needed the money for college. My first night on the job was uneventful. I arrived at 11 p.m., a cool breeze wrapping around me as I stepped out of my car. The parking lot was nearly empty, with just a few vehicles scattered about. I pushed open the glass door, the bell jingling softly as I entered. The smell of stale coffee mixed with the faint aroma of burnt popcorn hung in the air. "Hey, you must be the new guy," a voice called from behind the counter. It was Jake, the overnight shift employee. He was scruffy, with a beanie pulled low over his brow. He glanced up from his phone, a flicker of concern crossing his face as he appraised me. "You ready for a long night?" "Yeah, I guess," I replied, unsure of what to expect. Jake leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen, there are some rules you need to follow. Trust me, they're important." I raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and skepticism swirling in my gut. "Rules?" He nodded, eyes darting to the darkened aisles of snacks behind him. "This place has a reputation. Weird things happen at night. Just follow the rules, and you'll be fine. Break them and..." He trailed off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. I swallowed hard. What kind of rules? Jake leaned back, crossing his arms as if weighing his words. "First, always keep the front door locked after midnight. You can let customers in if they're outside, but don't unlock it for anyone who's not here to buy something. If you don't follow that rule, you might invite something unwelcome inside." My heart raced, but I chuckled nervously. "Okay, anything else?" "Yeah," Jake continued, his tone serious. "If you hear the doorbell ring and there's no one there, just ignore it. It happens sometimes. You'll get used to it. Don't go looking for anyone outside. Just keep your head down and focus on the customers that come in." I nodded, half believing him. "Anything else?" He hesitated, glancing out at the parking lot, where shadows danced in the flickering light of the neon sign. "If you hear strange noises from the back room, don't go investigate. Just stay at the counter. I can't explain it, but trust me, you don't want to see what's back there." As Jake's words sank in, I felt a chill creeping up my spine. It was a gas station, not a haunted house, but something about the way he spoke made my skin crawl. "Are you serious?" I asked, half laughing. "I thought you were just messing with me." He shook his head slowly. "I wish I was. Just follow the rules, and you'll be okay." I could feel the air growing heavier, a sense of unease creeping over me. My shift began with mundane tasks, stocking shelves, checking inventory, and cleaning the coffee machine. The clock ticked on, the minutes dragging into hours. Around 2 a.m., the night settled into a familiar rhythm. A few customers trickled in, their faces illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights. I served them coffee, chips, and candy, forcing smiles as they paid and hurried back out into the darkness. Each time the door opened, the bell rang, and I felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. But as the hour grew late, the gas station fell into an unsettling quiet. The only sound was the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of a passing truck on the nearby highway. I glanced at the clock, 3:15 a.m. Suddenly, the doorbell jingled, echoing through the empty store. I looked up, expecting to see a customer, but the store was empty. My heart began to pound. I remembered Jake's warning and glanced nervously at the door, but it remained closed, the glass reflecting my anxious face. "Just a trick of the mind," I muttered under my breath, forcing myself to focus on the tasks at hand. Minutes passed, but the silence was suffocating. Then I heard it again, a soft chime of the doorbell. This time, it was accompanied by a faint whispering sound, almost like someone was standing just outside, murmuring unintelligible words. I stood frozen, dread curling in my stomach. I remembered Jake's words, "If you hear the doorbell ring and there's no one there, just ignore it." but curiosity clawed at me. What if someone really was out there? I glanced out the window, but the lot was still empty, the night stretching endlessly in every direction. The shadows danced, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing just beyond the reach of the flickering lights. I blinked, and it was gone. Taking a deep breath, I turned my back to the door, trying to focus on the old radio behind the counter. Static crackled through the speakers, filling the silence, when suddenly a loud bang echoed from the back room. I jumped, heart racing. I remembered Jake's warning, "Don't go investigate." But my curiosity was stronger than my fear. Slowly, I walked toward the door leading to the back room, my footsteps echoing in the eerie quiet. Just as I reached for the handle, the doorbell rang again, loud and clear. My hand froze inches from the knob. I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of impending doom wrapping around me like a cold blanket. Against my better judgment, I looked back at the front door. A shadow moved just outside, a figure barely illuminated by the flickering lights. It was standing there, waiting, watching. The figure outside remained still, an indistinct silhouette against the night. My heart hammered in my chest, the blood rushing in my ears, drowning out the static from the radio. I squinted, trying to make out any details, but the dim light only cast more shadows. The strange shape seemed to sway slightly, as if caught in an unseen breeze. The doorbell rang again, a high-pitched jingle that echoed through the stillness of the store. I hesitated, torn between the strange pull of curiosity and the warnings that rattled in my mind. "Just let them in," I muttered to myself, fighting the instinct to lock the door and hide behind the counter. "It's just a customer." I took a step toward the door and the figure jerked, as if sensing my movement. My breath caught in my throat. It was now closer, the outline clearer, tall and unnaturally thin, with arms that seemed too long for its body. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the rising panic. This was just a person, probably a late-night traveler or someone stranded in the dark. "Just a customer," I repeated, more to reassure myself than to state a fact. I approached the door, forcing myself to ignore the racing thoughts swirling in my head. Reaching for the lock, I hesitated again, a flash of doubt sending shivers down my spine. The figure outside tilted its head, the movement almost bird-like, and I felt a cold dread settle deep within me. I opened the door just a crack, peering out into the darkness. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice unsteady. The figure stepped closer, and I finally caught a glimpse of its face, or rather, the lack of one. Where its features should have been was an impossibly smooth surface, a pale expanse of skin that reflected the neon lights like a blank canvas. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut. No, I gasped, my pulse racing. My mind screamed for me to lock the door, to barricade myself in, but I stood frozen, paralyzed by fear. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat, thudding against my ribcage. The doorbell rang again, a slow, deliberate chime that seemed to mock my terror. "Please, let me in," a voice rasped, faint and echoing as if coming from a great distance. "I just need some help." "Help?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. "Who are you?" "I'm lost," the voice replied, softer now, almost sorrowful. "Please, I'm so cold." My instincts screamed at me to run, to hide in the back room and never look back, but a strange compulsion held me there, rooted to the spot. I pressed my back against the door, wishing desperately for Jake to return or for a customer to appear. "I promise I won't hurt you," the voice continued, each word dripping with an unsettling sweetness. "I just need to come inside, please." The air felt heavy, charged with a mix of dread and a strange longing to know more about this entity before me. "You're not real," I muttered, trying to convince myself as much as the figure. "You're not real." "I am very real," it replied, the tone shifting to something almost soothing, like a lullaby meant to calm a child. "Just let me in, and I'll show you." I forced myself to take a step back from the door, mind racing. What did it mean by show you? My heart pounded as I glanced at the clock. It was 3:30 a.m. The longer I stood there, the more time I wasted. "Please," the voice came again, more urgent, and I could sense a strange pull, a gravitational force urging me to open the door. I shook my head violently, as if trying to dislodge the thought. I remembered Jake's warning, the heavy air of his words. "Don't open the door," I whispered to myself. "Just don't." I finally tore my gaze from the door, turning back toward the counter. I needed to focus, to push through this wave of fear. I could make it through the night. But then, from the back room came a series of loud crashes, like metal clanging against the floor. My heart dropped, panic surging through my veins once more. Was it something from the back room, or was it part of whatever was outside? As I turned my head to glance back, the doorbell chimed once more, but this time it felt different, more insistent, more demanding. I glanced at the door again, and the figure seemed to lean closer, a phantom yearning to bridge the gap between our worlds. "Open the door," it commanded, the sweet tone twisting into something darker. "Open the door, and you'll understand." I shuddered at its voice, realizing with a sickening twist that it wasn't begging anymore, it was demanding. My instincts kicked in, and I rushed back to the counter, fingers trembling as I fumbled for my phone. I dialed Jake's number, praying he'd pick up, but it went straight to voicemail. "Damn it," I hissed, stuffing the phone back in my pocket. I glanced back at the door, the figure still waiting, a specter of the night. I could feel its gaze burning through the glass, could sense the shift in the air around me. It was as if the atmosphere had thickened, suffocating me with its presence. Just as I was about to turn away, the figure raised its hand, and I gasped as a long, claw-like finger traced the outline of the doorframe. "You'll regret this," it said, voice low and chilling. "You don't know what you're missing." My stomach turned, and I could feel the bile rising in my throat. I wanted to scream, to run, but instead, I locked my eyes on the cash register, reminding myself of the mundane tasks ahead. I could do this. I just needed to make it through the night. But as I looked back at the clock, I saw it had barely moved. The night stretched on, time losing all meaning. I forced myself to breathe, each inhale shaky and shallow as I focused on the flickering light of the overhead fluorescence. The figure remained at the door, its featureless face and elongated limbs pressing against the glass like a desperate shadow. I felt the weight of its gaze, a palpable presence that seeped into my bones. "What do you want?" I shouted, surprising even myself with the volume of my voice. "Just go away." The figure tilted its head, the motion oddly graceful. "I want you to let me in," it whispered, the voice softening again, almost seductive. "I promise I'm not what you think. I can help you understand what lies beyond." My heart raced. I didn't know what that meant, but a part of me yearned for answers, for something more than this dreary life spent in the gas station. What lay beyond the thin veil of reality I clung to? What truths lay hidden in the night? But the other part, the part that still clung to sanity and reason, screamed for me to get back to work, to ignore the whisperings of the night. "Just leave me alone," I shouted again, desperation spilling from my lips. The figure's expressionless face remained impassive, the silence stretching like a taut wire. Then, as if it were responding to my fear, a loud crash echoed from the back room again. My heart skipped a beat. This time, I couldn't ignore it. I turned toward the door leading to the back, where the sound seemed to be coming from. Shadows flickered on the walls as the overhead lights buzzed ominously. For a moment, I considered Jake's warning again, "Don't investigate." But curiosity gnawed at my insides. What was going on back there? I crept closer to the door, each step heavy with dread. The noises intensified, a sharp thud followed by what sounded like metal scraping against the ground. I grasped the doorknob, trembling. With a deep breath, I opened the door a crack, peering inside. The back room was dimly lit by a single bulb swinging from the ceiling. Empty boxes were strewn about, and the flickering fluorescent light cast long shadows that danced across the walls. "Hello," I called, trying to sound brave, but my voice wavered. Silence answered me, thick and suffocating. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled as I stepped further into the room. My heart raced as I scanned the space, half expecting to find someone, something, waiting for me. Suddenly, the overhead light flickered more violently, and I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye. I whipped around, and my breath caught in my throat. A shadow darted past the doorway, disappearing into the depths of the back room. "Nope, I'm done with this," I muttered, heart racing. I spun around and hurried back to the front of the store. The thought of confronting whatever was in the back room made my skin crawl. As I reached the counter, I glanced out at the door. The figure was still there, watching, waiting. The absence of a face was haunting, an abyss that seemed to draw me in. My mind whirled with questions. Should I let it in? What would happen if I did? I felt the oppressive weight of the air around me, thick with dread. As I stood behind the counter, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, but time felt like it was slipping away. The eerie quiet had returned, the only sounds my own shaky breaths and the hum of the refrigerator. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, but I couldn't wake up. Suddenly, the bell above the door rang again. I looked up, heart in my throat, but the figure remained outside, unmoving. The ringing continued, echoing through the gas station, demanding my attention. "Stop it," I shouted at the bell, but it was relentless, insistent. Then, out of nowhere, the lights flickered and went out completely. Darkness swallowed the store, wrapping around me like a shroud. Panic surged as I fumbled for my phone, the small screen casting a faint glow. I could barely see anything beyond the circle of light in my hand. "Great," I muttered to myself, the chill of the night creeping into my bones. I remembered the back room and the strange noises. What was happening? Just as I was about to reach for the emergency flashlight behind the counter, I heard it again, a soft whisper from the back room as if someone or something was calling my name. "Help me." I gripped my phone tighter, dread pooling in my stomach. "No," I shouted, voice echoing in the dark. "I'm not going back there." But the whispering continued, the sound weaving through the darkness like a seductive thread. I felt drawn to it, a force pulling me toward the back. My heart raced, but I stood my ground, fighting against the compulsion. Then, just as suddenly as it had gone out, the lights flickered back on, the hum of the refrigerator returning to life. I blinked, disoriented, and looked toward the door. The figure was still there, closer now, its shadow stretching across the floor, looming in the light. "Let me in," it urged, voice smooth and almost musical. "I can help you escape this place." I shook my head, retreating further behind the counter, desperate to create distance between us. "I don't need your help," I yelled, but doubt crept into my mind. What if it did have answers? What if I was missing something important? "Don't you want to know?" it pressed, tilting its head again, a disconcerting mimicry of human curiosity. "Don't you want to understand?" The air around me felt charged, every nerve ending screaming to flee. I glanced at the clock again. It was still only 3:45 a.m. Time was frozen, and the night felt endless. Suddenly, a loud bang erupted from the back room, louder and more aggressive than before. My stomach dropped. Whatever was back there had grown impatient, and it was beginning to sound angry. With a surge of adrenaline, I made my decision. I rushed to the front door and locked it, the click echoing through the gas station. "Stay out," I shouted, facing the figure, defiance swelling in my chest. "I won't let you in." The figure stepped back, almost as if it were recoiling from my words. "You'll regret this," it hissed, voice slipping into a menacing tone. "You don't understand what you're turning away." I spun back to the back room, panic tightening my chest. I had to know what was causing the noise. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and headed toward the door again. If I was going to face whatever lurked in the darkness, I needed to do it now. "Okay," I whispered to myself, gripping the doorknob tightly. "No more running." I opened the door slowly, peering into the dark back room once more. The shadows clung to the walls like living things, and the air felt heavy, thick with anticipation. "Hello," I called, voice wavering. "Is anyone there?" Silence responded, heavy and oppressive. My heart raced as I stepped further in, the light from my phone barely illuminating the space. Boxes lay scattered, but everything felt wrong. The shadows shifted unnaturally, warping around me as if the darkness itself was alive. "Show yourself," I commanded, trying to sound brave, but my voice faltered as I stepped deeper into the room. Then, without warning, the light bulb above me flickered violently, casting erratic shadows across the walls. I stumbled back as a figure emerged from the darkness, its form almost human but distorted and wrong. It lunged toward me, mouth opening wide in a silent scream. "Get away," I yelled, panic seizing me. I turned to flee back to the safety of the counter, but the door slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. My heart raced as I pounded against the door, the heavy wood unyielding beneath my frantic fists. "Open up," "Please," I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. The sound echoed in the dim light, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the back room. The figure loomed closer, its shape grotesque, a twisted parody of a human form. The shadows clung to it like a second skin, and I felt the air grow colder as it moved. I could see its features now, hollow eyes that glowed with an unsettling light, a mouth stretched too wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that gleamed in the half-light. "No," I gasped, stumbling back as it reached for me, fingers elongated into sharp claws. I had to get out of there. Frantically, I turned around, searching for another way out. The walls seemed to close in, shadows shifting and swirling around me. I remembered the emergency exit at the back of the room, the one Jake had mentioned but I had ignored in my panic. "Think," I yelled at myself, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I sprinted toward the other side of the room. The figure growled low, a rumbling sound that reverberated through the air, and I could feel its gaze piercing through me. I reached the door leading to the emergency exit, yanking it open with all my strength. Light flooded in from the outside, illuminating the chaos of the back room and momentarily blinding me. I squinted against the brightness, then bolted through the door into the night. The cool air hit me like a slap, shocking me back to my senses. I stumbled into the alley beside the gas station, gasping for breath. I could still hear the creature's growl echoing behind me, a deep, primal sound that made my blood run cold. I looked around, desperate for an escape. The alley was narrow, flanked by the brick walls of the gas station on one side and the dark expanse of the night on the other. I felt exposed and vulnerable, and the shadows seemed to stretch toward me, trying to reclaim what they had lost. "Where do I go?" I muttered, panicking. I couldn't go back inside. I couldn't face that thing again. I glanced toward the front of the gas station, where the neon lights flickered erratically. A part of me considered making a run for it, escaping into the night, but another part of me, the one that craved answers, was drawn back inside. I had to find Jake and figure out what the hell was going on. I hesitated, heart pounding in my chest, then sprinted back toward the front entrance. The glass door loomed in front of me, the warm glow from inside contrasting sharply with the cold darkness of the alley. I pushed through, the bell jingling as I entered, and the familiar smells of stale coffee and chips washed over me. The store was empty, eerily silent, and I glanced around, searching for Jake. "Jake," I called out, voice shaking. "Where are you?" No response. I moved cautiously through the aisles, dread pooling in my stomach. The flickering lights cast long shadows, warping the aisles into dark tunnels. I could feel a presence lingering, something watching me from the corners of my vision, but every time I turned, there was nothing there. "Jake," I shouted again, desperation rising in my throat. "Are you here?" Then, from behind the counter, I heard a faint sound, a rustling followed by a soft thud. I hurried over, my heart pounding as I peered behind the counter. Jake was crouched there, eyes wide with fear, his phone clutched in his hands. "Thank God you're back," he breathed, relief flooding his face. "I thought you were away." "What the hell is going on?" I interrupted, panic bubbling up. "There's something in the back room, a creature. I saw it." He shook his head, wild-eyed. "You shouldn't have gone back there. I told you." "I know," I yelled, frustration boiling over, "but I need to understand. What is happening here?" Jake took a deep breath, and I could see his resolve hardening. "All right, listen closely. The gas station has a long history. There are things that shouldn't be disturbed." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean? Just tell me what I need to know." He hesitated, glancing nervously toward the back room. "At night, the veil between worlds grows thin. Sometimes, things slip through. It's why we have rules, to keep them out." "Things?" I asked, my heart racing as the reality of his words sank in. "What kind of things?" Jake's face paled, his voice barely above a whisper. "Creatures from other realms. They can look like people, but they're not. They feed on fear and confusion. If you let them in..." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I saw one at the door. It was asking to be let in. Jake's eyes widened in horror. "You didn't..." "I didn't let it in, I swear, but it said it could help me understand." "Understand what?" he snapped, panic lacing his voice. "It's lying. They only want to manipulate you, to trap you." Just then, the lights flickered again, and I felt a chill sweep through the store. The shadows in the aisles deepened, and I could hear that low growl again, resonating from the back room. "We need to get out of here," I urged, my heart racing. "Now." Jake nodded, urgency in his movements. "The emergency exit. It's the only way. We can't let it catch us." We dashed toward the back door, but as we approached, the door slammed shut on its own, trapping us inside the gas station. Panic surged through me as I pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "It's not locked," Jake shouted, pulling alongside me. "Something's keeping it shut." A deafening crash erupted from the back room, sending vibrations through the floor. I felt the world tilt beneath me, my senses heightening in the impending chaos. "We need to barricade ourselves," I screamed, glancing around the store for anything to use as a shield. Jake nodded, sprinting to the shelves and starting to pull them toward the door. I grabbed a display of snacks, wrestling it free and pushing it against the exit. Come on," I urged, sweat trickling down my forehead as we heaved boxes and shelves against the door, creating a makeshift barrier. Then, the growling intensified, a sound that seemed to shake the very walls of the gas station. I could feel the darkness creeping in, an oppressive force pushing against us, pressing against my chest like a weight. "Is this going to hold?" I asked, glancing at Jake, who was pale and sweating. "I don't know," he admitted, breathless, "but we can't just wait around to find out." Just as we finished barricading the door, a series of violent knocks echoed from the back room, each one reverberating through the store like thunder. I felt my heart race, panic clawing at my throat. "Whatever is back there, it's coming for us," I shouted, urgency spilling into my voice. Jake turned toward me, his expression grave. "We have to confront it. We can't hide forever." "But what if it breaks through?" I protested, dread pooling in my stomach. "We can't let it in," he said, determination flaring in his eyes. "We need to show it we're not afraid." I hesitated, glancing back at the door. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "There's no other choice." Taking a deep breath, we stepped back from the barricade, our hearts racing in unison. We positioned ourselves near the front of the store, ready to face whatever horror waited us. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness for a heartbeat before returning to their steady glow. I squinted, straining to hear the sounds coming from the back room. "Show yourself," Jake yelled, voice ringing out against the silence. The growling stopped, replaced by a heavy stillness. I could feel the air shift, the atmosphere thickening around us. Shadows stretched across the walls, curling and writhing as if alive. "Open the door," a voice rasped from the darkness, dripping with malice. "You cannot hide from what you have summoned." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. This was it. We had to stand our ground. "Leave us alone," I shouted, fighting against the fear that threatened to consume me. "You don't belong here." The figure materialized in the doorway, a dark mass that loomed over us, swallowing the light. It was a nightmarish blend of shadows and twisted limbs, its eyes glowing like burning coals, piercing into my soul. "Let me in," it hissed, voice a cacophony of whispers and growls. "Let me show you what lies beyond." Jake stepped forward, fierce determination in his eyes. "No, you are not welcome here. We reject you." The creature paused, as if taken aback by our defiance. A moment stretched, tension crackling in the air like static electricity. I could feel the darkness swirling, a tempest of rage and hunger that threatened to envelop us. "Foolish mortals," it sneered, voice dripping with disdain. "You do not understand the power you invoke. I will find a way." With that, the shadows surged forward, pushing against the barricade, and I felt the shelves shudder under the pressure. "Hold it," Jake shouted, pushing against the barricade with all his strength. We fought to keep the creature out, but the shadows clawed at us, relentless and overwhelming. I felt the air grow colder, a biting chill wrapping around me like a serpent. Then, the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness. I could feel the creature's presence surrounding us, its whispers echoing in my ears, promising knowledge, power, understanding. "Let me in," it repeated, voice a hypnotic lure. "You'll never be alone again. I can help you escape this life. Just give in." I fought against the temptation, shaking my head as panic threatened to overwhelm me. "We won't let you take us," I shouted, feeling Jake's strength beside me. As the darkness pressed in, I felt a flicker of hope. The emergency exit was still behind us, just beyond the chaos. We could still escape. "Jake," I yelled, breaking through the oppressive haze. "We can't stay here. We have to go." He nodded, his determination unwavering. "On three. 1, 2, 3. We pushed against the barricade with all our strength, the shelves creaking under the strain as the darkness surged forward. The door shuddered, but held, and for a moment, I thought we'd be trapped forever. But then, with one final push, we broke free, barreling toward the emergency exit. I flung the door open, light flooding in once more as we dashed outside into the cool night air. The shadows writhed and twisted behind us, but we didn't look back. We ran into the night, the gas station receding behind us as we fled from the darkness. As we reached the edge of the parking lot, the world around us seemed to shift. The gas station stood there, unchanged, a dark sentinel in the night, but we felt a weight lift from our shoulders. "We made it," I gasped, breathless and trembling. Jake nodded, eyes wide with shock. "But what about it? What about the creature?" I looked back at the gas station, the flickering neon sign casting an eerie glow. I don't know, but I refused to let it take control of my life. Just then, a howl echoed through the night, chilling us to the bone. We exchanged a terrified glance, the realization settling in. "This isn't over," Jake whispered, dread heavy in the air. "It's only just begun."